Welcome to That Midlife Gay. I'm Henny, and in every episode, I sit down with queer experts and everyday gay men to explore what it looks like to stop performing and start living as our true selves. If you've built a life that looks good from the outside, but feels quietly empty inside, you're in the right place. Today, I'm talking with Trevor James. Trevor works in places that most men are taught to avoid: the body, vulnerability, touch, desire, shame, and honest intimacy. Trevor is a touch therapist and an intimacy coach, an author and a facilitator with more than 8 years of experience helping men to reconnect with themselves, their bodies, and their sexuality. So, hi, Trevor, and welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you here today. And I'm really excited to hear about you and your journey, and most importantly, what's led you to doing this work. So please go ahead and tell us more about yourself.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. Oof, where do I begin? Let's see. I used to be an event producer and director before I got into this. I did that for 28, almost 30 years. And then I sort of retired from it when I lost my job and I was looking for something else. And I just thinking, why don't I do something on my own? When I started my career, I had my own business and I thought, why don't you go back into that? I used to have my own event production company. But I knew I didn't want to go back to events. Events are very stressful. They require a lot of energy. And I wanted something that was less stressful, something that was more rewarding, something that was more me. But I couldn't figure out what. It took me almost a year to figure that out. I came across an article about touch therapy, and that fascinated me. And I started doing some research on it, what touch therapy was and how it was used and who's doing it and all of that stuff. And I found there was one person in Los Angeles doing that. And I thought, okay, I think there's room for something in here. And I found out I could get certified for that. And so I got certified for that and for cuddle therapy. Eventually, I did massage therapy as well. So I do the touch and cuddle therapy and the massage. And the pandemic happened. And I was like, what do I do now? So I started studying Tantra. And I did that over the pandemic and did some diplomas and stuff. And at the end of the pandemic, I started giving workshops in person to men. So that pretty much was how it evolved. And so I used my touch therapy, cuddle therapy, massage therapy, and Tantra knowledge to inform what I do today.
Mm.
And what I do is very trauma informed and very consent forward because even though people may want touch, people need touch at the level that they're at. We have some people who are touch averse, for example. They may want to be touched, but touching doesn't feel good to them. And it might take a while for them to get to a level where they're more comfortable with touch. So you've got a wide range of people. You need to accommodate for that. And then you've also got people who've been abused and for whom touch means something completely different. Touch doesn't feel safe to them. And so you have to be very careful about how you approach touch with them. So that's pretty much how I got into this. I'll give you a little backstory on me. I was born in Ghana, but I grew up in Switzerland and the UK, and then my family moved back to Ghana. I spent quite a lot of my older years there, older childhood years there. And then in college, I went to Russia. I went to Moscow to study Russian literature. So I did that and came back to Ghana, and that's when I started my event production company. And before I came to the US, I was in the UK, I was in France for a while. And then I eventually came to Los Angeles and decided I would try and lay some roots here. So that's how I got here.
Wonderful. So what is it about touch that drew you into that world? Obviously, you've got a very rich history and your heritage from Ghana, growing up in Switzerland. What would you say is your journey with your own sexuality and touch? And Is there an overarching theme that may have drawn you to this work?
Yes. So I can't think of being very touch deprived as a child, but I know that there wasn't very much intentional touch that was given. Having said that, touch, I think, was something that I've always liked because I've always liked cuddling. I've always liked touch. I'm a very touchy feely person. And I noticed that some people felt uncomfortable with that, you know. And so I learned to moderate it so I would not touch as much. When it comes to my sexuality, I knew, or at least I suspected, probably when I was about 8 years old, that there was something different about me, but I didn't have the vocabulary or the context to figure out what it was. I just knew that it wasn't accepted. I just knew that I couldn't share it with anyone. I had no role models or people that I could look up to or examples of people who I thought were like me. And I remember in those days we had lots of encyclopedia. And every time I go to somebody's house who had a collection of encyclopedia, I would go in and look up the word homosexual, hoping that I'd find an explanation that would not look like me. But that did not happen. I did not meet anyone who identified as gay while I was in Ghana until I was 26 years old. And so all of this while I thought I was the only person in the country with this affliction. I was Catholic, so that added to the guilt as well. I started going to what was called the Scripture Union, which is a more evangelical style of worship, and I would go for altar calls for deliverance and all kinds of things, trying to pray the gay away. And of course, that didn't work, and I was very frustrated by it. I was headed for the seminary to become a Catholic priest, and at a point, I just said I could not do this because I would be disappointing God. I felt I was unclean and I could not present myself to God as unclean. And I just decided I wasn't going to do this because I couldn't promise myself or anybody that I would no longer be attracted to men. But I remember somebody touching me in a way that felt very special. I did not know, for example, that my nipples were sensitive until this person touched me. The touch was very deliberate, very intentional, and very present. And that changed everything for me. And that was when began my love affair with touch.
What age was that?
This was in my 30s.
As a fellow pray the gay away person, I've been through through similar journey, so I can really relate.
Yeah.
And I came out later in life at 25, and so much of what you've shared really landed for me as well. But I'm really interested about touch and how we grew up, because the first experiences of being touched by a man, especially in my experience, in the moment was wonderful, but was followed by shame
Mm-hmm.
and was followed by feelings of guilt and shame, very similar to the things that you've just described there.
Yes.
And I wonder if you can speak on that and talk about. I know on your website you talk about working with men on shame and intimacy and reconnecting with themselves. And I just wonder, as gay men growing up in the closet and having all of that baggage, how that sort of shows up in our lives, and especially when it comes to relationships and intimacy.
Yeah. Whew, that's a big one. Shame is very insidious. It shows up in very little ways here and there. Sometimes it's big, but sometimes it's very subtle. And I find that with a lot of the men that so for example, I work with, all right, let me give this first of all. My usual thing when a client comes in is to greet them and ask if they want a hug. Believe it or not, some people would say they don't want a hug, even though I'm going to be touching them quite intimately in a few minutes, just because they don't want to feel that sense of closeness or affection right off the
Vulnerability.
yes. And that comes from shame. And it's interesting though, but at the end of the session, if I offer them a hug, they'll take it. But in the beginning, they're just very closed off. Another example would be someone who came in and from a religious sect and only wanted to be touched a certain way because any other way would feel like a sin. There's shame at play as well. I could go on giving you examples like forever, but shame isn't something that you just turn on and turn off. You can become more aware of the shame and make a choice not to play into the shame, but the shame will always have some residue in your life. It doesn't mean it controls your life anymore. It's just always there. It's always present. Because, for example, I think of doing something like these days, it doesn't happen so much to me, like, thinking about sex as a sin because I don't think it's wrong and I enjoy it and I think everyone should. But I might find myself thinking, should I share this with this person? And again, that is shame coming into play. And then I decide, yes, I can share. There's nothing wrong with it. And I'm proud of it. Actually, people ask me about my sexual preferences and I tell them I'm an ethical slut. I want to reclaim all of that sense of power and not let shame take over.
And when you catch yourself editing yourself, you catch yourself changing your preferences to suit someone else, that's when the shame shows itself. So yeah, that's
Okay.
very interesting. Why would you think this work is important, or how do you think this work can help, especially with shame, to help overcome shame?
Well, what this work does is to bring attention to shame. The thing with shame is it cannot survive the spotlight. Put the attention on shame and it withers. Shame thrives in secrecy. But when you bring it to the light, it dissolves. And so helping people recognize where shame is present, where shame shows up, helps them become aware of when they're editing themselves, when shame is present, and decide to make a choice not to let shame have the driver's seat. So that's how it works.
Yeah, I again, that is such a beautiful way to describe when comes into the light, it dissolves, it
Yeah,
disappears,
yeah,
because it does thrive in darkness, and the more we keep it hidden and secret, the more shame we're going to feel about it. So in
absolutely.
a way, I feel what I'm hearing is by doing this work, you're really prioritizing yourself, and I feel like it's a brave step for anybody that may experience shame to take that first brave step and feel very vulnerable. In some cases, don't even want to hug.
Yeah,
But I feel like showing up for yourself again and again and again helps you to bring that into the light and dissolve the shame, and then hopefully you can carry it on into other areas of your life, or you can then become braver to communicate your desire for touch and your preference for touch, and discover, like you've explained there, that you didn't even know your nipples were sensitive. Discover things about your body that you didn't know you enjoyed. I
yeah.
suppose. But I'm really interested in how this work in intimacy and touch helps us to connect deeper with ourselves. So yeah, I'd love for you to talk a bit more just about that, and in terms of how we can form a deeper connection with ourselves in general just through this kind of work.
Okay. So, with my sacred intimacy sessions, for example, I have a session called mindful intimacy. A mindful intimacy session is a one-way touch session where I'm touching the client. The client is not touching me back. Now, the point of that session is to help you. It's almost like body mapping, trying to figure out what lights up in your body when you're touched, because it's different for everyone. And so we go through several sessions of touch in different places, different kinds of touch, just to figure out, where do you have pleasure in your body? Where does pleasure live in your body? And so that helps you get to know yourself more. And then when you are with somebody else, you can guide them to touch you in those places where you have more pleasure. Another thing that it can help with as well is just learning to know what kind of brings up emotions for you. Because certain touch can bring up certain emotions for some people. And even especially with people who have experienced trauma, for example, a certain kind of touch can just trigger off some emotion, some reliving of an experience. And knowing where that happens is important to know as you get to know yourself better. Now, getting to know yourself better also helps you with other people because you can also know how you can touch other people because you've got the experience in your body and you know that this could be nice for somebody else to feel. And so you do the same thing. It might not work for them, but you might be close to the mark. And that's how you can get to know yourself, your body much better. You become
Yeah.
much more connected. Now, for example, when I'm doing my tantric experience massages, the the focus there is on sensations. And it doesn't stop surprising me how disconnected some people are with their bodies. You can touch them and they can feel the touch, but it doesn't do anything to them. And the point of the exercise is to get you to the point where you can actually start feeling the touch in your body and responding to it. I tell people that when you acknowledge the pleasure in your body, it rewards you by giving more pleasure to you because you are a lot more aware of sensations in your body. Knowing that and feeling that helps you experience much more pleasure with another person
Mm,
because so many little things that would go by unnoticed, you have a heightened sensitivity to. And it just makes things get into, technicolor for you. So,
mm.
yeah,
And this reminds me again of when you spoke about that time you were touched and you used the words intentional.
exactly.
So I feel like, especially the hookup culture that is rife at the moment, and nothing wrong with it, but there's a lot of hooking up, and if you are someone who maybe struggle with intimacy or touch, or you have experienced trauma in the past, there's no there's no communication, there's no healthy exploring. And so I feel like this really provides an opportunity for people to connect with themselves and to get in touch. And it's almost like learning more
Hmm.
about yourself and your own body. And then it's all about communication as well. You've touched on that too. And I feel like the communication element of it is to be able to communicate with your partner and sort
Yes.
of then checking in terms of what they enjoy and what they like. But it is a journey, and again, it's more about you than it is about the act, isn't it? It's
Yes.
more about connecting with yourself, allowing yourself to feel. Because from everything you've just said as well, the word that popped into, or the image that popped into my mind was, it's retraining our neural pathways sometimes, because it's what do we think of as other sex and pleasure and enjoyment, and how have we been trained of what it should look like to enjoy sex and to be pleasured. And it's almost like there's parts of your body that might feel dormant, or you might not experience pleasure from, and it's just retraining, being open, intentional, and therefore connecting to all of you. And I feel like breath is probably very important, and
Yes.
time, and slow down. And again, that all speaks into just general well-being, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes, you're absolutely right. Because going back to some of my sessions, I teach people to bring attention to sensation. That is how your senses are going to be heightened. Because as they say, a sensation grows where attention goes.
Mm,
And so you begin to notice the sensations much more. Now, you need breath, sound, and movement to help bring that around. Breath, sound, and movement help sexual energy move through the body. And making sounds when something feels good to you, moving when something feels good to you, you acknowledge the pleasure. You begin to notice a lot more things that are pleasurable when you start noticing. And people are surprised. I tell them in the beginning, you might want to fake it in the beginning till you make it. But once you get into it, you wouldn't have to use any energy at all. You will just be doing it, making sounds
Mm,
and movement,
mm,
just because your mind has just gotten into the flow of focusing on sensation. And that can be very transformative for some people.
mm. And the clients you work with, what is the biggest before and after the transformation you see in them over a period of time, or when they finished working with you or ready to move on? Is there something you can point out that you feel is
That's interesting because everyone comes with a different story and is at a different stage. Some people come and in one session, they just feel transformed. Some people, it happens over time. And so it's difficult to tell because, for example, there's one person just recently who told me that how much I had changed his life since he started coming to me. And this is somebody who has come to me several times. And I hadn't noticed any big change. But he was telling me how he had changed. And I was like, so this was working. He just didn't let me know or express it before, but he had just I'm trying to remember exactly what he first came in with, but a lot of shame was attached to touch. And he just got to a point where he was a lot more comfortable with male touch.
so it really builds confidence,
Yes,
confidence,
yes,
confidence and
exactly.
permission, self-permission, I
Hmm.
presume.
Exactly. And that's what happens a lot in my studio. People get actually seen for who they are, and that gives them permission to be who they are.
I feel like that word "seen" that really encapsulates it all, because I think that's the thing that's quite often missing, because we, as kids growing up in the closet, being taught to some degree that who we are not okay, we learn to hide ourselves, we learn to edit ourselves, and that shows up in our adult lives, and it shows up how we present ourselves in the bedroom and how we experience joy. And that moment where you feel seen and you feel safe to
Yes,
express all of you. And if you feel safe to express parts of you that you might feel shame about, and it is met with joy and pleasure and safety, that's when you really truly feel seen. And I can't think of anything more than that moment to really sort of brings joy and fulfillment, and just the moments of pure happiness when you
yes.
can be all of yourself.
Being seen is really crucial because sex can only, not just sex intimacy can only thrive when you feel safe. And when I talk about intimacy, I'm talking about, emotional intimacy, physical intimacy, spiritual intimacy, intellectual intimacy, all of those intimacies can only happen when you feel safe. And you can only feel safe when you feel seen and you feel comfortable. So that's very important.
Yeah. And currently, I mean, there's a lot of talk about loneliness just across all areas of life, but there's been a report by the CDC in the US which says 41% of gay men are experiencing loneliness. It's described as chronic loneliness, which is considerably higher than straight cisgender identifying people, who is around the 30% mark.
Yeah.
So that's quite a high number if you think that 41%, it's so close to half of our community
Yeah.
that experience loneliness on some level.
Yeah.
And there's a real sense of disconnection there. It's a real sense of, well, I mean, what is loneliness? It's feeling disconnected
Yeah.
from the outside world, but also from our community.
Yeah.
Can you speak on that in terms of the
Yeah.
people you work with or patterns you see in your work?
Yes, gay loneliness is very different from straight loneliness. With gay loneliness, you can be popular with your group. You might have your posse. You connect with everybody on social media, on all the other media, all of that. You may go out with your friends for brunch each week and have lots of friends, but still feel lonely. You can be at a party that you're probably even popular at and still feel lonely. And that's because you don't feel known. You don't feel seen. And that's where the loneliness comes in. People think of loneliness as in being by yourself, being alone. And that's not it. You can be lonely when you're surrounded by people. People can see you, you can be popular, you can have all the friends you want, but if no one actually sees you, no one actually knows who you are when the doors are closed, you will feel lonely because nobody knows you.
And where do you think that comes from? Why
Hmm.
do you think that affects our community more than the straight community?
Well, the thing with the straight community is that there are a lot more systems in place. When it comes to the gay community, each of us have had to create our own structures. So, for example, when it comes to dating, for a lot of people of a certain generation, we didn't start dating till we were much older. We didn't start dating men till we were much older. We didn't have that experience of dating and what it could entail till we were much older. And we approached those relationships with a deficit. So that's one reason. Now, I've seen a couple of social media posts which say something about gay men don't have friends they haven't slept with. I find that interesting. There might be some element of truth to it, but I don't want to buy it hook, line, and sinker. But yes, the gay community is very sex forward.
Mhm,
And so a lot of emphasis is put on the sex as opposed to getting to know someone.
mhm.
And that is where we find that we're lonely because we can have all the sex in the world and still feel lonely. You can be the greatest lover and still feel lonely. It's just because we haven't put in structures that help us have this support system that mitigates loneliness.
Yeah. I think there is a case of us growing up without always having healthy representation, first of all, of what we see reflected back to us, that our relationships or our idea of a relationship is very much modeled on what we see around us, which is straight and cisgender relationships.
Yes,
And the fact that we have been taught to perform a version of ourselves that's acceptable, and that means we seek validation in order to be loved and accepted and
yes,
included. And so we carry that into the world with us. So now we
yes,
come out and we do the same things to our gay counterparts. We still want to impress them. We still want to
yes.
have their approval. And
Right.
so, like you said there, we can have the most beautiful body, we can be the most intelligent person in the room, we can have the best career. And this is what we all strive for.
Yeah.
You know, gay people are notorious overachievers. And
Yes.
and therefore it's because we've been taught to, or that we learned that we get the dopamine hit every time we do a good job, or whether, get the positive feedback. And so absolutely hear what you say, that the disconnection and the loneliness come from, I feel like from my own experience as well, is gay friendships. We tend to want to have as many friends as possible, especially in my 20s. That was the case. The more friends to go out with, the better you feel about yourselves. But those friendships don't always go that deep. We tend to just keep them at a certain level
Yes.
because it's safe not to to get too vulnerable.
Right.
And that's the difference between being seen, being popular, or being truly known.
I remember when I started my career, I was fastidious about everything. As an event producer, I wanted everything to go perfectly. And I would just get so disappointed if anything was just slightly out of place. I realized recently that it was because I was trying to be perfect. I was trying to let my professionalism, my perfectionism say who I was. That was my facade. That was what I wanted people to know about me, but not the real me. I didn't want anybody to know that I was even a sexual person because that would bring a spotlight on my sexuality. And I wanted to avoid that at all costs. So, yeah.
So isn't that quite an interesting thing to think about? You didn't want anybody to know that you were a sexual person, and look at the work you're doing today.
Exactly.
So how did that play out with your friends and your family?
It's interesting because I marvel at the transformation. I call it a 180-degree turn. 10 years ago, if you had told me this is what I'd be doing, I would have said, you must be joking. There's no way in hell I could do this. But look at me now. But I think it is my lived experience that informs what I do today. It is my life experience that propels me to help other people because I know what it's like being in that point where shame is in the driver's seat. And I know that it takes a lot to get shame out of the way. I've struggled with it, still struggle with it, and I know a lot of other people do as well. So how do my friends see it? I'm not quite sure. Some people are a little surprised. Some people don't know the full extent of what I do. But yes, there's always fascination when I explain to people what it is that I do.
Mhm.
Because people don't even know that that could be a job at all.
That exists, exactly. But what I'm hearing is that this work and the journey you've been on since you've decided to embark on this work is transformative for you as well. And the Trevor today, that transformation that happened there, you didn't even want people to see you as a sexual being, and now you are out and proud and doing amazing work that impacts other people's lives. How does that make you feel?
Whew. I feel amazed sometimes. Other times I am surprised, but it feels good. It feels great to be able to do what I do and enjoy what I do. I can't say there haven't been moments where I've felt, imposter syndrome. Like, who are you to be doing this? You still have your demons. But I also know that transforming my clients helps transform me as well because we're all on that journey to become better people, to become better men. A lot of the things that I help people with, I know I'm like, "Oh, I've been there. I know what this is like. I know what you're feeling. I know what you're going through because I've experienced it as well. In some cases, I might still be experiencing it. So I don't put myself up as an expert know it all. I'm on the journey as well. I can help in some way, but I'm on the journey as well. So let's go along. I can help you find things that I've experienced and I've learned and pass those on to you. And that's how my work goes.
So, do you want to tell us more about Eros is your method and how people could work with you? But specifically, there'll be people listening to this who's not in your area. So, I know you do in person work, but tell us more about the Eros method, but also how can people potentially start this journey anywhere in the world?
Okay. So the ERAS method is a method that I came up with, especially for people who have problems with intimacy. We spoke earlier on about people who probably dissociate during intimacy or go blank or don't know what they want specifically and so on. The ERAS method is to help with that. So the stands for E is for embodied. You want to feel what you're feeling in your body. Where does that live in your body? How does that feel in your body? So, for example, if somebody asks you, "What do you want?" before you say, "What do you want?" just feel in for a moment. What is it that you want? So, feel that embodiment. R is for regulation. You want to regulate yourself and not spin out of control. So when you're in that moment, after you feel the embodiment, try and regulate yourself. O is for owning. Own what you're feeling. It's not embarrassing. It's your reality. Own it. And then S is for sharing. If you can, share it with your partner and say, all right, I'm feeling a little disconnected now. Can we stop for a minute or so? Let me bring myself back into groundedness. Things like that. So that's the ERAS method. So I have this program called the Feel More, Perform Less coaching program that can be done virtually. So it's an 8-week program which goes through the ERAS method. So we're going to teach you all of these things in those 8 weeks, and we'll go through each of those methods. And by the end of the 8 weeks, you're going to feel a little more confident about how you feel, and you will get a lot more what I call erotic confidence. So erotic confidence is not about being the best in bed, but erotic confidence is about being yourself in bed and not performing for someone else's pleasure.
That's beautiful. And I think it's from everything you've said there, it's about you. It's about
Absolutely.
coming back home to yourself
Exactly.
and exploring all of your edges and finding all of your pleasure points and everything else. That's wonderful. Trevor, it was so lovely to talk to you. And it really, honestly, I think you're doing such amazing work. And for me, just to hear about your journey, your lived experience, the way you found your way into this work, and from everything you've explained, that it's been honestly a pleasure to listen to. I feel more enlightened just listening to you, and I hope everybody else would feel the same. Where can people find you?
I think the easiest way for people to find out about me is on my website. It's trevorjamesla.com.
Wonderful.
trevorjamesla.com.
Is there anything else you want to add or say as your final words of wisdom?
I think I would say try listening to yourself for a change. Listen to what's going on in your body and heeding what it says, because the body knows a lot more than your brain does.
Yeah, absolutely. And there we go. Listen to yourself, slow down, and reconnect with yourself. Start by listening. And that's a beautiful thing to leave us with. And thank you for everybody that tuned in and listened to this conversation. Follow us on Substack under That Midlife Gay for more, and we'll have weekly episodes coming up. So thank you again, Trevor. Really enjoyed this conversation and I hope to speak to you again in the future.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for having me.